And now I'm very excited to bring back a fantastic sports bettor and longtime friend of the show, and Mr. Ron Marlewski from the Inside Blitz. You can follow Ron on Twitter at RonAceSports. Ron, the NFL never stops, my man. It's draft coming up around the corner. How you doing?
I'm doing great, ramping back up, of course. I think about 3 weeks before the draft, everything gets pretty serious on this end, and I'm just working through my usual method of getting ready for the draft. And then it's not over. I know a lot of people after the draft, it's over for them. It's not over for me. I've got a lot more work. So I'd say between now and mid-May, right after the schedule comes out, I'm busy, and then it's the off season again, and as such as it is with the NFL, and take vacations, do some other stuff. But right now, it's draft, draft, draft.
It certainly is draft, my man. It's a lot to take in right now. It's fun. We love it. But at the same time, there's a lot of uncertainty in this draft. And I did my mock, so I'm excited to talk to you about it a little bit. Now, subject to change. I do definitely change things. I'll always keep it called 1.0. I don't need to do all that, but we'll make some changes as we go if needed. So, I'd like to ask you for the audience, tell us a history of your NFL love and draft work throughout the years.
Okay, well, so this will age me a little bit, of course. The first time I actually wrote about the draft was in 1980. It was a 4-page report. And I got interested because of the old-time radio host and guy who worked for the Sporting News and Pro Football Weekly, Joel Bushbaum. And he just had very colorful explanations of these players. And I was becoming a fan of the NFL through the AFL and the merger and everything. And I wanted to know more about roster building. Why was my team, the ones that I follow, better than the others? Or why are they slipping in certain areas? And I just got really interested in that. And it helped my handicapping as well, because once I developed a method to my madness as to how teams build rosters and what teams are doing right and what teams are doing wrong, I just started up. And we're to the point now that my analysis evolved. I got better at handicapping certain positions. I wasn't as good with one or two positions. And then I was really good with running backs and quarterbacks and stuff, but I had to evolve my train of thinking for some of the other positions. And now we're talking about 64-page recap from the days of the 4-page recaps, a very repeatable process. I study and I look at film and some tape for some of the players that I don't know that well, that I haven't watched or I haven't read about. I'll go back and forth reading about more things. I'll set my draft board up by position. I have about 250 or so draft eligible players this year that I think are worthy of being drafted, a little bit more than last year. And I look at GMs. We talked offline very briefly. I think the evaluation of what each particular GM and war room does is very important to handicapping the draft and to understanding what a team might do or might not do in the draft. And it's been a lot of fun doing it over the years. That's what I can tell you. So I keep going back, even though I keep saying when I'm all done, how much longer can I do this? When I'm doing it, I love it.
Okay. And that's the important thing. You're doing it because you love it. Same with the betting part. You've been betting before most of these listeners on our show, and we're even alive. I was probably very young, and I'm kind of aging myself too. But no, we love it, Ron. One of my favorite guests, definitely for the draft too. Go-to information. You want to go to Ron and all the great stuff that he puts out. So I'm excited to read your dissertation, and just keep them coming. Speaking of betting, how many bets will you be making? Just in your opinion, how many do you think you'll be making for the NFL draft this year?
I think there's two reasons why it'll be lower than usual, because I'm the kind of guy who makes 50, 60 plays during the draft, 65 plays during the draft. two reasons that that's not happening this year. Of course, one of them has been a constant. Living in California, you have to rely on offshore or partners or friends to make plays. But the other two things are, one, I'm tired of getting limited. The line, it's not that much that you could get down. I'm enjoying it from other angles. I'd rather still use the draft to get ready for season wins and some of the other prognostication that I'm doing. And secondly, as you know, there's fewer options right now, and they're coming out later than usual. If you go away from maybe DraftKings, you go to Las Vegas, where they could be really jumping this up. They're actually ramping it down. If you look at Circa, they only came out with the stuff yesterday, and they're they know that they're not an expert in this. That's why they're taking lower limits. And for the first time that I've ever seen Circa do something, instead of minus 110 each way, they pride themselves on lower juice. You're talking about betting splits that are plus 130, minus 185. And that tells me, obviously, that they want nothing to do with this. They're just putting it out as a public service kind of loss leader type thing. So if it's harder to make plays and then you have to operate on information, even though not all information is correct, a lot of it is, especially at the top of the board. And so you have to get down in that split second before the odds have changed. So I have a few. I'm probably going to make 25 or so before it all gets said and done, with a few long shot positional bets. I'm going to have fun with it more than anything else.
Oh, that's good. And, I don't know why they're so weird about it. And yes, they get beat on the draft, but it's not like all these people are just collecting all their money and running away with it. They're keeping it in their accounts for the most part. And I guess it's the sharper player that, would be up on them, is why they do it. But I think it's also good advertising for them. So it's a little frustrating, but yes, you're right. The menu is smaller. And I also find it interesting that, laying juice is kind of safe in a lot of ways in the draft, in my opinion. Not for every play, of course. There's definitely a lot that can be wrong, but it's like when something's becoming like solid, the books start creeping up, and then that, man, this feels like a sure thing to me. As I talked to you before before we came on, I was talking about the Cleveland Browns general manager gushing all over Travis Hunter, and it's pretty clear that he's making his intentions, and if he doesn't go with Travis Hunter, he's going to be a liar. And the truth is that, sure, someone can jump him and they could trade down. That's the biggest worry. But that thing, skyrocketed, but it didn't go up quick enough. It took like 4 or 5 hours to get to minus 700, minus 800. I grabbed a piece in the minus 300 range. So I'm going to sit on that for a little bit and see how it goes. But yeah, the draft is unique because the sharper people will lay juice, and they will lay a lot of money on the juice, at least if these are going to allow limits.
Yeah, I would agree. You see more favorites in this kind of thing because the word gets out and stuff like that. But in a study of GMs, I think you could still find long shots. Last year was an exception, very predictable draft, in my opinion, last year. But if you're unsure about a GM, or if you don't like, if you know that GM has a weird track record, if you think Atlanta or think Jacksonville and stuff like that, you can probably find value plus 500, plus 600 on a position that they might go to rather than the chalk position, because they themselves are so erratic in their drafting. So one way to find long shots, I believe, is to look at some of the GMs that are a little spotty with their overall draft record.
Absolutely. And our new GMs that might surprise some people, like CD Jacksonville and a few others, and we'll get to that. My draft strategy changes year by year. My strategy is to I was so correct last year on what the position was on the teams. I regretted not making more plays. So instead of doing like half unit, full unit, I'm doing quarter units on a lot of this stuff. Took a couple shots this year. My numbers are pretty high, but it's not necessarily as high as I've been in the past either. I'm going to wait on some real information. But let's talk about the top 5 here. The number 1 pick is consensus Cam Ward. Now, when I wrote it out, I don't agree with the pick personally. I actually like Shedeur Sanders as a better quarterback. Now, I don't now if I compared these quarterbacks to last year, if you remember, I had Bo Nix number 4 and Penix number 3. I would have the top guy here behind Bo Nix even, so I'm not super high on this quarterback draft class, and I was higher on Bo Nix than the market last year. But I also didn't see them get drafted so quick, but ended up being right. Cam Ward at minus 20,000. That's unbettable. Have the Titans even said for sure? Like, I mean, it almost feels like a foregone conclusion that he's going to be picked. I have to believe it by the number, but man, it seems like this thing could get weird.
Yeah, I think there are two factors in play. Number one, it's an indictment on Will Levis, because if they had that much trust in Will Levis, then maybe there would be a different scenario. And number two, maybe we're seeing a trend that will probably not continue, where teams value the picks. Every single team has a pick in the first round, which is historically unbelievable. And unless they were wowed by a trade, this has to be Cam Ward, because quarterbacks in this day and age on a rookie contract and with the rules favoring offenses, you swing at a quarterback. And so Cam Ward has to be the answer.
Yeah, they're going to swing at Cam Ward, and I'm concerned because he played with the best players that money can buy in an ACC conference that wasn't so good. So I'm, he had some issues. He had a bad second half of his Washington State career, but then he showed very clutch last year. So yeah, it's going to be Cam Ward. Who's your 2 through 4?
For quarterbacks or or just for this?
Let's go for the draft. 2 for 4.
For the draft.
You think, yeah,
so,
if you have it.
Yeah, I mean, I personally like Carter a little bit better than Hunter. Nothing against Hunter, is one of the most smooth draftees that I've ever seen. I mean, the way he catches the ball, the way he pivots on defense, there's just so much I like about him. But if I had to choose, I would choose Carter. We talked off screen a little bit about that as well, because he impacts the game. He's going to impact the game for a decade. And Hunter, I'm still concerned a little bit about his frame. I think he could handle 1.5 usage, let's say all of cornerback and half of wide receiver. But the problem I have is he's going to wear down a little bit faster with his frame than I would think Carter would wear down. So for the short and long term, I'd rather have Carter. When we get to 4, it gets a little bit more tricky. And I may save some of this a little bit, because I know we're going to talk about the draft one by one next week when we get together with Matthew Friedman. But I'd say right now it's 4 would have to be probably offensive tackle for New England, because they need it. But there's such a big drop between pick 3 and pick 4. What are you going to do? And then pick 5 with Jacksonville is kind of a wild card, like you said, with the new regime. Is it Mason Graham to plug up the defensive tackle? I think the wide receivers are dropping. The cornerbacks have issues, in my opinion, because so many of them come in with a half year of experience last year because they all got hurt. So there's not a lot of competition unless you're going to go after an offensive lineman or a defensive tackle or an edge. So that's where I would look in terms of the top 5.
Right, absolutely, and I agree. Carter is the most impactful player, but I think you think the same, that Cleveland will pick Hunter, and then Carter.
Yeah,
will go
now
to
I
Giants.
do.
Yeah, and Carter will go to the Giants. Well, Cleveland also signed their guy.
Sure.
Myles Garrett, and it's like, you want to, sure, it'd be great to have 2, but I mean, they're in quarterback hell already. It's like,
beyond hell.
Beyond hell. So, it got interesting with me when I got to 5, because, I took a shot at Tyler Warren at 17-1, and now he's 20-1 on DraftKings. Because the way I look at it is Jacksonville drafted 2 defensive tackles last year in the 2nd round and in the 4th round. And I think they traded up to get Jefferson in the 4th round. I'm not sure which one it was, but the picks were almost next to each other. They had 2 4th round picks. So it's like, if you're going to do that, and both are still on the team, They didn't lose anybody, but their defensive tackles weren't good. Was that more about coaching? Are you going to, just go defensive tackle again? Or are you going to fill a tight end gap that there's literally nobody at? And at least you got like the best guy in the draft. A lot of people like Loveland. I don't. I think Warren's better. I'm sorry. I watched Warren. I see him play USC. I see him play a lot of games. He's better. I'm sorry. And he can block a little bit too. And so the way I look at it is at that price. Like just say I could say no. I would rather bet no to Tyler Warren at minus 300, but I'd rather bet yes to Tyler Warren at plus 1,700. If you know what I'm saying, it just feels like Liam Cohen could be a wild card here. Now, what worries me is I've been doing research on Mason Graham, and I did see him doing a workout in a Jaguars Army shirt, but it was a Jag, so I'm like, and I think to myself, is that AI or is this him? And maybe it was him, and maybe he knew he was going the Jaguars. You can't know for sure because they could trade down, or maybe he's trying to butter them up so he's drafted high because he knows that's the highest chance he's going to get. I don't know. But I mean, at 17-1, when you literally don't have a tight end and you have Trevor Lawrence, who needs to get his head out of his rear end, I think that would not be a strange play. AKA Brenton Strange is listed on their depth chart as their tight end right now, Ron.
Well, people who know me know how much I love tight ends and how there's a correlation to tight ends and playoff appearances. I mean, you look at the teams that make the playoffs, they all tend to have a top 12, top 14 tight end. And Jacksonville, Houston, a lot of these teams, Indianapolis, are happy with kind of run-of-the-mill tight ends and maybe 3 of them instead of one superstar. So Kiev, would I be unhappy if Jacksonville took Warren? No, not really. But I think if it was the old regime, Baki, who was pretty good in round 1 and then the worst GM in the history of the sport after round 1, I think he would trade down from 5. And I could see if they liked Warren that they would move from 5 to 9 or move down a little bit so that somebody could move up if they could find a trade partner. So for that reason, I probably wouldn't like Warren at 5, even though, the fit to Jacksonville would be nice. I would like that particular fit. Personally, I think Warren's draft range for me is between pick 7 and 14. 7 to the Jets because they passed on a tight end last year to get an offensive lineman, which I understood, and 14 to Indy because Warren's fall should end at Indy if Indy's paying attention at all.
Absolutely. And what's up to Dan Rivera, he is not a big fan of Ward because he's not going to be playing with talent for now either. And so I agree with that. And to be honest with you, if Jaguars do get a nice offer for somebody, maybe somebody wants Genty or Graham or somebody, and just wants to make sure they're cool, then I would even feel better about my 17-1 that's now 20-1 because I think that puts them in the 7 to 14 round that you just mentioned, and or it could be even Colson Loveland. I just bet tight end, and it's just to the Jaguars. So that'd be something that would be nice. But you got to take your shots and roll with them. So let's talk about Genty. Raiders number 6 pick. A lot of people talk Genty. I don't. I mocked the Raiders to pick an offensive tackle in Kelvin Banks. Now, I'm not sure if it's going to be Banks. I think that it makes more sense to pick Banks. There's a lot of things I don't like about Genty. A, he played against terrible defenses in a very good Power 5 type team in Boise. B, he did show bad against Penn State, 3.5 yards per carry. And C, he's not big, and he ran a 4.42 40. This is not Saquon Barkley we're talking about. This is not Jonathan Taylor, right? This is Genty that is more of an Austin Eckler in my mind. And it's not like he's bad. I have him as a top 3 back, but I don't think a reach would be smart. And the fact that Tom Brady is there, I wonder if that influences them a little bit. Because Tom Brady, they didn't prioritize running backs during his regime. and maybe he has some say there. And being a 10% owner, I think he might influence them to make the right decision, Ron.
So you're the first person other than me that's talked about the defenses that Genty faced, which were actually world record bad. Not to take anything away from Genty, because he's still clearly the number one back in this draft, in my opinion. But there has to be some hesitation that the defenses he faced allowed composite over 6 yards per carry. So, that's a really bad stat. And then when he faced the tougher defenses, he was down around 4 yards per carry.
Right.
Now, if it wasn't Pete Carroll in the room, I'd say no, Genty's not going to the Raiders. But the problem for the Raiders is I think the cornerbacks are not top 10 worthy. And I think the wide receivers are starting to be not top 10 worthy. So you pretty much have to fall in love with an offensive lineman or hope that Mason Graham is available at 6, which he very well could be. And I can tell you the Raiders have done their homework on Mason Graham. That's part of the stuff that I've kind of looked at. So if Mason Graham is there, maybe there is an avenue for doing that. And maybe somebody falls in love with Genty, and Genty is gone at 5, like you kind of hinted a little bit with that Jacksonville pick. If they trade back, maybe somebody wants him. But, it's kind of polarizing. I just don't know if Genty kind of fits with Pete Carroll, but I have a feeling that that's not the pick.
Well, that'd be good. I do have a bad price on Genty over 9.5. That's much better now. It's actually 6.5. But my fear now is that the Denver Broncos trade ahead of the Bears to number 9. and then my 9.5 gets smoked because of that, So the books kind of know that too when they threw that number out there. It's one of those situations where you're a little bit worried that, maybe a team is in love with them. And with all the media talk, it wouldn't be so shocked. And Dan is asking, is Genty so good that you have to take early? You can find running backs. You can't find running backs in this draft. Raiders need so much help. And that's what we're saying, Dan. And we agree with you. I feel that the step down to Judkins or heck, man, I even like Scatterbill a lot just for the way the kid is, here at Arizona State. The step down to O'Marion Hampton. I don't think it's that big from Genty, especially when they played the Power 5, or Power 4, I should say, and the SEC and the Big Ten. There's just so many backs that I almost feel like it hurts the backs in the first round. That's why I like backs under the 2.5, really, for the first round on.
Yeah, this is a really deep running back draft, and Hampton reminds me of Gibbs when Detroit was going to pick him at 18, but then they got blindsided by Witherspoon at 6 when Seattle took him right above, and that surprised everybody. So it wasn't their fault. But then they panicked and they drafted everybody around too early. Well, they got the last laugh with Gibbs because Gibbs turned out to be worth it at the 12th pick in the overall draft. And to me, Hampton is that kind of guy that maybe Denver, maybe some of these teams are interested in Hampton or the speed of Henderson or Junkins or some of these other guys. There are running backs to be gotten later. And if you listen to the GM talk, and the GM of the Raiders, for example, he said something very important. He said it's about supply and demand. If there's only one linebacker that's a first-round pick, like this year, Campbell, and you need a linebacker, maybe you take him because the drop-off, if you need a linebacker, is that you're going to get a 3rd or 4th round talent after that. So if there's a lot of 2nd round and 3rd round running backs that you would be excited to have, why not go after a position where the supply and demand isn't, if you missed the penalty for missing, if that's your team need, is greater. So I think Genty may fall in that kind of dilemma.
Well, I think Genty will go in the first round. I do have a mock to the Bears. I don't know who's going to take him. I think that missing on O'Marion Hampton or Judkins or Travion Henderson. I mean, well, actually, that's three guys that you're probably going to have a shot in the second round. There's two guys, Judkins and Henderson. I mean, you're going to be able to grab a guy that's really good, like a RJ Harvey from UCF, right? A Brashard Smith from SMU. There was just so many loaded. Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, he was really good.
I like him.
There's just so many options here. And, Genty, being what he is, he's not a burner. He was 4.42. I'm concerned that he's going to get overdrafted. So makes a lot of sense. It looks like we have some consensus here as well. Let's talk about a couple others. What's interesting is Jihad Campbell is 8.5 to the over minus 225. What is your thoughts on Campbell here? I got to look to see where I have him. He was kind of like in the news a little bit. I feel like he's going to fall a little bit myself, but I don't have him quite like that far. I have Cincinnati getting that linebacker because, as you said, isn't there like just one or two linebackers you trust, the Georgia guy and the Alabama guy?
Yeah, so you have Campbell, and who would be the other ones on your list there? 'Cause I don't have it in front of me.
Jalen Walker from Georgia.
Okay, yeah, and I kind of had him as he's kind of hybrid. I had to decide whether or not I wanted to call him a linebacker or an edge, and I ended up, because his best skill set is rushing the passer, I ended up putting him at an edge.
Okay, I think that the books would grade him as a linebacker though. For their prop.
So that's scary. If you're making a bet. I got in trouble with that one time. Cornerback and safety, I got in trouble with that.
Well, Micah Parsons was a linebacker, and he became like the best edge rusher, or second best, or right up there with the TJ Watts and the Garretts. I mean, that's very interesting, and I think that just being that classification, when we're betting, we have to go by that, but that might give you an edge. Like with cornerbacks, it's like they're counting Hunter as a cornerback. So, that's really interesting. And Campbell, I think Campbell's off a torn labrum. That's what Dan was saying. I had to double check that. I think I remember that. So, it's a situation where, you just have to care about what the books look at him as. What I found was interesting was James Pierce. His over is 31.5. I tried to put a bet on him against Jalen Milroe, who's going to get drafted first. I was going to lay minus 160 with Pierce. And as soon as I was about to hit the button, it jumped to 225. Some other people were on it. So I thought that was a really nice head-to-head that I could have hit. I think they even pulled it on DraftKings. But I find it interesting because James Pierce, for a while, was the second guy listed behind Carter. Is he really going to drop past 31.5 to possibly the Eagles at 32? I think that's kind of what that means.
Okay, well, let me digest that one, because I didn't expect you to talk about one of my better plays of the draft season. I was saving that for the end of the thing, but I have a ticket on Pierce against Milroe.
Oh, you got one of them? Nice.
Yeah, I got it, and I got it early. And it's not so much that I like Pierce, but two factors again. One, edge rushers get overvalued. And two, I don't have a high opinion of Milroe. I have him as a third-round grade. So even if Pierce goes in the second round, because there are some character concerns that teams are trying to put out there, and I haven't delved that deeply because I'm not that interested in whether or not he goes over 31.5 or not. I just have an opinion that Milroe shouldn't go as high as people are making him out to be. It's lying season right now, and we have to wonder whether or not this draft is like the Kenny Pickett draft, where there's only one quarterback going early, and the Will Levis. Remember, Will Levis, 24 hours before the draft, was considered the third or even second pick in the entire draft, and then everybody says, "Wow, he's slipping." But I had a second round grade on him. I would have been not so excited to see him go second or third overall. Right. So I think this is more of a function of Pierce and Milrow in terms of that. I like Pierce because I'm not a fan of Milrow.
I am not either, and it's weird to see him invited to the draft. I kind of tweeted back at Adam Schefter, I'm like, is he a glutton for punishment? Because it's going to be the cameras on him the whole time, and he's going to be looking frustrated.
Yeah.
It's almost like maybe they asked him and said, dude, we know you're not going to get picked, but we want the drama. We're going to pay you some money for it. I don't know, man. I got conspiracy theories all over the place if you want, but that's just
problem is it only takes one team, and if you got Cleveland and the New York Giants who could trade up at the end of the beginning of the second into the first to get a guy like Milrow. Would it be a move I would make? Absolutely not. But that's, if you want to play devil's advocate, that's the way to lose that play.
Well, if you remember, I called Anthony Richardson last year a poor man's Cam Newton. And this year I call Milrow a poor man's Anthony Richardson. So that's pretty bad.
Like
if you're going to look at that. Let's do one more. Over under. And what was your price you got on Pierce against Milrow? What'd you get on that?
I think 160, 150. I think 160 at the most, because I got alerted to it, by somebody else. And I said, really? And so we went in right away.
How about Michael Williams? And he's been dropping. He's 15 and a half, minus 300 now. I don't have Michael Williams, which is a Georgia DN, going until 29 to the Commanders. And I'm wondering, I know he was revered before the season started as a top 10 guy. Maybe they talked he could be the best one in the draft. But he was injured some last year, finished with 21 tackles, 5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. I mean, who's going to pick Michael Williams under 15 and a half? I have to scratch my head a little bit. I guess maybe the Miami Dolphins. That's possible. Maybe the Niners. But I don't see a lot of people going edge really before that, in my opinion. What do you think?
Can't remember who has the 15th pick, but I thought they were in play as well.
I'll tell you, it is the Atlanta Falcons, and you're right, they are in play.
Yeah, they're in play. If one would ever open the door to their organization and say edge is important, because they're crazy, but that would definitely be the place I would go there. And it kind of, the reason why he could go earlier, and this opened at 17 and a half and then went to 15 and a half. So there were some people that thought he would go a little bit earlier. I actually have a ticket on him going in the first 17 picks, under 17 and a half from Michael Williams. 2 reasons. One, because guys like Mike Green, who Dan Rivera mentions in the chat as to what our opinions of him. Green is a tremendous pass rusher, but he's going to be off about a third of the boards because of character and because of accusations. He's going to be on certain teams' boards, but he's not going to be available for certain teams. And 2, you got a Georgia guy, and Georgia guys are coveted, and so they get bet up a little bit. So edge rush, the only danger, and why I could see me losing that play, and you're right, you have him a little bit later. The danger on Michael Williams is the fact that there are a lot of edge rushers, and we don't know what order they're going to come out in. So, and we don't know when that rush is going to come, and then they're going to come fast and furious because you don't want to miss one. So is he in the front of the line or is he in the back of the line? But I think that kind of talent tends to go in the first half of the draft.
Oh, gotcha. That makes sense. He is very talented. There's probably with Atlanta, I had mocked Shamar Stewart to Atlanta from Texas A&M, but you're right. It could absolutely. They did pick up Floyd from free agency, so they do have a Leo there in Floyd. But I was thinking maybe they beef up the defensive line a little bit more of like an edge, 3-4 edge type guy. Maybe like probably one of those defensive tackles that can do some pass rushing. It's funny. I just looked and DraftKings put up the top 5 exacta, man. Plus 165, Ward, Hunter, Carter, Campbell, and Graham. That I guess I could hedge out of my out of my Tyler Warren pick. I mean, it was a quarter unit. I'm not going to probably hedge it to care that much.
Yeah.
But I mean, that seems like the logical one, and it's at plus 165. I find that funny. Now these are coming out, and I think that people are going to really bite for these. And I'm just not 100% sure even it's Will Campbell at 4.
Right.
Is the Patriots given that much? I don't think so. They might like someone else. I think this draft can go whacked, just completely out of whack. Because there's going to be teams trying to trade down, and there's going to be no takers trying to trade up, right?
You're right. Absolutely.
It's just going to go out of whack, and people are going to be scratching their heads. And what the weird thing about the draft this year, and we can go to positional totals, is that there's not many wide receivers like we usually see. And Ron, you remember me, how I dislike wide receivers going into the first round for the most part. There's exceptions, of course. But I find it really interesting in my mock. I only have the 2 guys, T-Mac, McMillan, and Golden. And I actually have Golden going to the Cowboys. I mean, what do you think? Do you think a Buka or somebody slides in to bust this 2.5 for the win for the totals of receivers in the first round?
Well, it's very interesting because you're right about finding receivers. You can find receivers. You can find Puka Nakua in the 5th round. You can find a bunch of 2nd rounders. Edge rusher, offensive line, it tends to be formful. The better players are 1st round players. But wide receiver, there's a caution sign out there. I bet over 2.5 receivers, and I don't know that that's a good bet because of what you're talking about, and primarily because both McMillan and Golden, McMillan was expected to go 6, and now, and now it was Cowboys at 12, and now the Cowboys may not be looking at him. And Golden, everybody gets pushed back a little bit, and I think wide receivers are getting pushed back. I actually like Ibuka. That's why I went over 2.5, but I'm not sure everybody shares my like of Ibuka.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't, I'm not sure if anyone shares that. And I don't like Ibuka just because and this is for all the wrong reasons, but Smith is better. I'm sorry. Smith is better. He's younger, and he can't even go out for the draft. And when you're that much better, it's really weird to take the second best guy in the first round. I think receivers you wait on. I have 2. I didn't bet it because 2 is so close to 2.5, obviously. Now, Dan wants to know, how are we handling the Mike Green Marshall edge with the off the field issues? That's a great question because he has some charges, and he's been accused of something in high school as well, sexual assault type stuff. Mike Green was a beast at Marshall, and his measurables are great. Now, here's the thing: I am ignoring him. I'm looking at him as an either or because I'm looking at a position total. I got all the way up to 9 defensive tackles / edges, which is right at the number 8.5. So whether it's Green or somebody kind of at the bottom, like a Pierce, right? Maybe I would think that it's going to get to 9 anyway, but I personally would not pick him until the 2nd round, Ron.
Yeah, this is perfect Dallas Cowboy time. Cowboys trade back from 12 and pick up a guy like Mike Green because they don't have a 0 tolerance policy in the Dallas Cowboy anywhere. So I could see him being picked up. Like I said before, it's funny. His draft odds really haven't changed at all. One of the few that not even the juice has really changed much, because people don't know what to do with him. He's going to be on some boards and off some other boards. Talent-wise, I think he belongs right where they pick him, kind of right in the middle of the 1st round. But because there's so many good edge rushers, the smarter organizations are probably going to say, I want a safer bet right now. If he was out last year, he might go earlier because there weren't as many quality edge rushers. But now he's competing against a lot of other people. And I think because of that, you might see him slip.
All right. Then I do agree. Falcons is what Dan said, but I don't even know if they're going to be able to tolerate that, because that's the 15th pick. That there's just I'd take I take Michael Campbell all day, over him.
Yeah. That's where I think he could land right there. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons took a kicker at 15 the way they operate their draft.
Hey, man, Michael Penix might turn out here. I mean, it's the old Garson was not so good last year, unless he was playing games. I don't know what happened with that, but that's just a really weird situation. Let's look at some other positional totals here. We already kind of discussed running back. Do you think offensive line gets to the window over the 6.5? I do think that there's some interesting guards in this draft that's going to go in the first round. And I just feel like even though the position isn't overwhelming this year, Ron, I think the need is so great. And when you get down to the Kansas City Chiefs, Ron, they picked a running back in the first round named Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That didn't really work out. They know that running backs aren't moving their needle over there. They got fine running backs with Pacheco and Hunt. They're going to go offensive line after the Eagles just manhandled them last year, And I think that's a sharper pick to bet that the Kansas City Chiefs pick an offensive lineman. I got plus 105 on that, Ron. So what do you think about the total and maybe on the Chiefs?
I think I would lean over. There's a number of people that are going to straddle round 1, 2. The Minnesota kid, who you're probably familiar with, is that Estery?
Ursery, I believe.
Ursery, yeah, he could go. He's right there. Josh Connerly, I believe from Oregon, he could go in that particular area. I'm really going to be interested to hear and see where Josh Simmons go, who I'm pretty high on. So you got those, and you've got the other guys, and then you have the jack of all trades, Zabel out there. So I would lean 7 more than 6, and because for offensive line, if you miss out on the top, let's say 6, 7, 8, there's a drop. There's going to be a drop. This is not last year's class where there's so many good offensive tackles that are coming out. So if I'm a GM and I see a little bit of an offensive line run, I don't want to miss out.
Right, and I don't either. And unfortunately, watch for these odds because it's plus 100 over 6.5, minus 130 over under 6.5. So that means they're using 15-cent lines on these things. The offensive players 15.5 minus 110, under 15.5 minus 120 on DK too. So they're definitely juicing things up, and they're not budging. And the reason they're not budging is because they don't give a shit. They don't want to get taken for the draft, and they want to try to keep people away as much as possible. Another positional total that I took a bet on is the cornerbacks over 4.5, and I got plus on that. Here's the thing. It might not hit. And people are talking about how what's his face from Texas, his name just escaped me real quick, is supposed to drop a little bit. He's supposed to be a slot corner. And I'll just quick pull his name up.
Barron?
Jahdae Barron. Jahdae Barron. But even so, I think that he played enough not slot corner in his normal position last year. He's a burner. They're calling Travis Hunter a quarterback. I know Will Johnson's going to go in the first. He's good enough from Michigan to go in the first. So I need 2 more guys. I think the Packers could use a cornerback. Jari Alexander is requesting a trade, and they're going to give it to him. So I got some teams at the end, Ron, that I think are in need for a cornerback. I do have the Niners picking Will Johnson from Michigan at the 11th position. And I actually have the Packers grabbing either Ben Morrison or Siobhan Revel. Revel was hurt last year. So that brings me to 4. But, you keep going down. I have, let's see here. There's another one sticking out. Maxwell Harrison. Maxwell Harrison.
Yeah, he's rising. Max Harrison is rising.
And I'll tell you this, that would make 5, and I would be happy. I would hit my bet. I'd hit plus 200 for that. And so that's my free play here. But I think that it's interesting to see the numbers on the Iowa State kid, Darian Porter, 6'4", went to the combines, didn't say no to the 40 like a lot of guys are, ran a 4.3 40. He was a late bloomer because he was a wide receiver. But when you're 6'4" and you're 200 pounds and you're running a 4.3 40, that's got to be pretty attractive to an NFL team, Ron.
Yeah. I have a note that he had 7 career starts.
Possibly, yeah.
That's not a lot to go on.
No, but his measurables are.
Yeah. His measurables are, and some teams draft on measurables. I understand that. But I don't like this cornerback crop. It's full of injury and uncertainty. The guy from East Carolina, Ravel, he has a very short career, and he's going to have I think he's probably athletically has the highest ceiling of these guys, but he's got a steep learning curve. He was hurt. He was almost killed in an accident, years ago. And then he's been hurt a couple of times. His story is a very encouraging one, and I'm rooting for the kid, but he's going to make a lot of mistakes the first 2 years on the field. And that, to me, is not a first round pick. I would go Hunter. Barron is a sure first rounder to me. Beyond that, I guess Will Johnson as well, although I have speed concerns. I have 3 that belong in the first round. I have Hairston as the top of the second rounder. I have Porter in the middle of the second round. I have Ravel at the end of the second round. I don't have
and Hunter and Travis Hunter. And Travis Hunter. He's
Hunter, yeah.
He's called a corner, so you have 4 then.
Yeah, I have 4 if you put Harrison there, but I really would rather have 3 in the first round if I were GM.
And that's fair because there's what you think you should do and what you think is going to happen. So, and it just depends upon if some of these teams that need a corner can back out and get to the second round because somebody's going to jump up and draft in Ibuka. That's why I'm not.
No, you're right. Because a Green Bay won't do what I want them to do. They're going to do something different. And cornerback is a need, and they may reach. We've seen steam on cornerbacks and safeties and linebackers, guys that went from. I remember this as one of the sportsbook things. The over-under on one of the Green Bay guys, Savage, I believe, was like 50.5. Then it was 43.5. Before the draft, his number dropped to like 29.5. It got steamed like crazy. And Green Bay took him in the 20s. So I've seen Green Bay do this kind of thing before. Would I be surprised? I wouldn't be surprised if 4 cornerbacks went, but I to be honest, I would be surprised at 5.
All right. Well, I would not be surprised at 5. I would be surprised if it's 6, but that's where we differ. But here's the thing.
I'll root for you.
Thank you, because it's plus 200, and you do if it's plus 100, I'm not picking it, and that's where you got to understand percentage wise is why you bet. Like I don't think Warren's going to go 5th, but at plus 17 to 1, 17 to 100, that's something that's attracted to me. Well, that brings us to bet or best bet or whatever you want to call it, beer bet banger, my man. Any plus money shots that you like for the draft to give out to our audience here for a banger. Doesn't even have to be one of your main plays, just something for fun.
Yeah, and I'm kind of backing off on it a little because I know you talked about how Hilaire didn't work out much for Kansas City at the back end of pick 32.
Yeah.
The problem there was that Hilaire actually did work out for a year, and then he got hurt, banged up, and nothing was going right for him. And then Pacheco comes over. He gets banged up after he helps them get to and win a Super Bowl. Kansas City may not stay at 32. They may go up to get somebody like a pass rusher, or they may go back if they like Henderson at running back or somebody like that that's available. And we know that Kansas City covets speed. I know that Adam Chernoff, he mentioned that Kansas City running back was plus 1,300. I've seen plus 1,000 for Kansas City running back. If you want a pizza money, beer banger, small play or whatever, Kansas City's one of those teams that could do anything and everything. And it's better than a 10% chance to me that they get somebody like Henderson if he's available, because they love the speed on that roster. And Henderson has tons of it.
Well, the price is nice. You definitely don't want to hate on that. I just think that they do go O-line, but we'll see. We'll see what happens, because Kansas City can do some flashy things, as they're a pretty flashy team. I'm going to go with the Vikings breaking trends, picking a safety for their very first pick at plus 320, just a quarter unit or beer bet banger, whatever you want. The way I look at the Vikings is that they're very stacked at a lot of positions, and I think they can pick a lot of different people. But, a guy like Malachi Starks from Georgia is very attracted to a team like this, because they lost guys to free agent in Cameron Bynum, right? They lost that guy. They need to replace that guy. And it's not like they're going receiver. They're not going quarterback. You know that. They got their guy. They're not even messing with Aaron Rodgers. They got their running backs, Jones. It just feels to me like safety's a big need when you're playing teams like the Lions. Maybe the Bears improve. You're playing the Packers. I like a chance with the Vikings taking a safety at plus 320.
Safety's my number one need for them, cornerback number 2. So I think they're one of those teams that maybe gets you over for 5 cornerbacks, or maybe it gets you your safety play. And those two safeties, the top 2 safeties, of which Starks is one of them, they're very different playing styles, but both of them are first rounders. So yeah, I wish they had a prop where would a team trade, yes or no? Because and you could probably get good odds. Like, would Philadelphia trade might be the only one that's even money, but everybody else would be 4-1, 5-1, something like that. Minnesota can't help themselves. They'll trade up, they'll trade down, they'll trade sideways. What are the odds that Minnesota stays at their pick? I say it's 50% at best.
Which makes it even better to pick a safety later. So I like that.
Absolutely.
Well, so keep that in mind. Well, Ron, real quick, we have 1 minute. Any futures that you bet yet in the NFL? Or are you still doing processing?
Last year I had a lot more at this time. The only one that I bet so far is pure speculation, because I like what they've done in free agency. They're going to have a 4th place schedule. I'm waiting to see how the schedule layout is, and whether or not I want to hedge or whatever. But I just couldn't believe that the Patriots opened at 8.5 at probably 50% of the books. They were 7.5 and 8.5. I don't know if I'm going to like under 8.5, but at this particular point, to go from where they were to get to 9 and 8 just seemed counterintuitive to me. So that's actually the only one I have in hand right now is New England under 8.5. How about you?
I do have a couple. And since this moved in my direction, as I gave out to a premium, the Giants under 5.5 minus 120. I put a decent size on that. And to be honest with you, I might even buy back if it gets to 4.5,
Yeah.
Because I think 5 wins is very fair for this team. Their schedule is absolutely brutal this year, my friend. You know what sucks about having a 4th place schedule, Ron, this year? The fact that you have to play the 49ers.
Yeah.
That's not fun. You have a 4th place schedule and you got to play the Niners because they're injured. But not only that, the Giants have to play the Bears, who should be improved with a much better coach. And then they have to play the Saints, who's, we'll see. They might not be good, but they might not be as bad as the Giants. Looking at that 4th place schedule, it's not looking so attractive. I'd rather play the Panthers, the Packers, and the Cardinals than the Niners, the Saints, and the Bears, personally. So that's a really rough 4th place schedule. But, then you look at the division. You got the Washington twice, the Eagles twice, the Cowboys twice, and I forgot which conference they have to play in the AFC. But certainly not going to work out well. But the truth is that if it does get down to 4.5, I might buy back for at least half or possibly middle, because it's all about value. It's minus 160 right now at FanDuel, maybe a little bit better at DraftKings. So that's my future run. Where could our listeners get your great information and media?
Well, every once in a while I make guest appearances. Thanks for having me on here. This off season, I'm doing an every Wednesday podcast. A lot of it is draft related, handicapping related, journey related, just a lot of stuff, just some stories even as well. But next Wednesday, for your audience, you'll be joining me and Matthew Friedman, and we're going to go through every pick in the first round, our thoughts and stuff like that. So we'll give our intel. I'm still finding that intel. So basically, unless you're going on vacation with me, that's the only place you're going to find me this after the draft is just the Wednesday podcast, and then keeping it quiet until we get closer to the NFL and college football.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. I can't wait to come on with you next week. And I'm sure I'm going to change a few things around myself, probably to have some more plays. So thanks again, Ron. We'll be texting next week.
Thank you.